Welcome back to the next bit, Bite-Sized. I'm Hannah McQueen, founder of Brightly.
And I'm Mark Leishman, and in this short episode, Brightly's lead geriatrician, Dr. Cheryl Johnson, explains why human connection and having a purpose can help you live longer.
So Cheryl, can something as simple as socialising really extend your life?
Absolutely it can. And we know that because we've studied it. So there's these things that are called blue zones. And for those of you who don't know what one is, perhaps not expert in older people, a blue zone is an area within the world where old people thrive. And there's about 5 of them all scattered out throughout the world. There's one in Japan, there's one in California, there's one in Italy, there's one in Greece. And they're areas where they have common elements to them that support people ageing. And one of them is social connection. And moving forward from that, it's also about sense of purpose. So, they live in these communities, they socialise in these communities, and they have a sense of purpose within those communities. And that's really important for all of us, but more important or equally as important as we age. We're social beings. We're all about socialising with people, about connecting with people. That's what we do. We're hardwired to do it. You just can't help it. Every time you meet someone, you're always trying to work out, do you know someone in common or some anecdote about them or something like that? That's just who we are. And that doesn't change as you get older.
Is there a better way of socialising? So is a conversation with a friend better than, say, just hanging out or being next to someone but not speaking?
I don't think we've really kind of studied it, but I think we all know that intuitively. It's much better us kind of having a conversation like this or, having a conversation over a coffee or, going out for a walk and having a conversation. It's so much more richer than perhaps us communicating over email or over the phone or something like that, because we're seeing the whole person. You're seeing all the way that they're reacting to things, their body language, all of that stuff. We're all sharing a joke together. The nuances of conversation get lost over the phone. They do get lost in emails and texts and things like that. So it's really about that, seeing that whole person and interacting fully with that person.
So you mentioned texting as a way of communicating. What about FaceTiming and visual through the internet? Is that as good as face-to-face in person?
Well, if it's all you can do, then yes. Absolutely. If your family are over the other side of the world and that's the only way you can connect with them, well, that's great. But, making that effort, if they are just down the road, go around and have a coffee with them, and rather than, do it over the phone. I think, our society's changed a lot where, I certainly growing up, and I think you'd be the same. We used to kind of just pop round to someone's house and, have a couple of bickies and a cup of tea and things. And I think we've sort of lost that in a way. But that social connection's really important for us, rather than, kind of picking up our phone and sending them a text. Let's just go around and chatting is so much richer, so much better.
You mentioned in those blue zones that they had that social connection and a sense of purpose. Why is having a sense of purpose so important?
Well, a sense of purpose is what gets us up in the morning. It's our way of being. It's what we're doing. And so our, it's what drives us. I think as people age, we do have this kind of nihilistic attitude about aging and about older people and how, sometimes they're thought of as a bit of a burden to society. They're expensive, they cost a lot in terms of healthcare and things like that. But older people have so much that they can give back and so much that they can give to their communities and to their families and should really be kind of cherished.
And honoured.
Absolutely, yeah.
Do you have examples of a sense of purpose, what people can do to fulfil that?
So you walk around Bunnings in Mitre 10 and you see all the older builders and plumbers teaching these young fellas how to use the tools and how to do DIY, which is great. Yeah. My uncle did that and he loved it. And that talking to people and kind of
still being relevant.
It helping them out.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Got a great story in Hobsonville, where I live. There's a retirement village, and there's a crossing on quite a busy street. And it's basically sort of, one of those rises and falls in the street. And the kids have to walk across that to get to school, which is on the other side of a field. So what did the people in the retirement village do? Well, they ended up having a school road patrol for the kids every morning and every afternoon. They were out there making sure the kids were crossing safely. They've now actually put in a proper crossing for the kids. But, that's such a sense of purpose. It's really, another area is in grandparents looking after grandchildren. Really, really important sense of...
excuse me for a second. Mum and Dad, are you listening to this? Sorry, back to you, Cheryl.
We're never off.
Yeah. But we know that. We know how good it is for older people to be looking after younger people. We saw that in that documentary about the kindergarten kids in Australia who went and they met people in a retirement village and they made those connections. And some of those connections lasted for years. And, it's about that relating to people, that social connection. It's about the older person having to kind of think back to what they were like as a child and how do you actually interact with a 4-year-old. It's not quite the same as interacting with your friends. But that was, really good sense of purpose for those people as well.
And for people who might be struggling to integrate into the community, like some of those roles, unless you've already got the grandchild or the kind of link into Bunnings, that might be quite overwhelming. Is that why a lot of older people go to church? Because it gives them some of that connection and kind of intertwines with a sense of purpose as well within that community?
Yeah, and it's that sense of belonging. Church and religious organisations are really good for that, belonging and having a place. You see other sorts of opportunities like walking groups, and you'll see them, a group of older people all walking together and they're getting some exercise. They usually end up at the local cafe afterwards and have a coffee, and so you're getting that social interaction. Same, around my community we see an older group of bikers, push bikes, not motorbikes, but exercising together. Any of those things that bring in that sense of community, that sense of belongings, really important.
And social connection, of course, is a great thing. But what if you can't get that? The opposite of course, is loneliness, being on your own. And that obviously plays a huge price on people's...
And I think as we get older, we do tend to get a bit more insular. People stop driving as they get older, and that might be because for medical reasons or might be because of loss of confidence, and that does tend to isolate them. I think it's incumbent on our communities to really be bringing those people into the community and supporting them and helping them in whatever ways they can. And I think that is really a challenge for isolated older people like that.
I've read somewhere that people can die from loneliness, which sounds horrific, actually.
Sounds like dying from a broken heart.
Yeah. Is that a thing?
Yeah, unfortunately, it is a thing. It's not uncommon. Sorry.
It's Debbie Downer.
Well, I don't know, it's somewhat beautiful, I think, just to reframe. You take a couple that has been together and they've been married for 50 years. One spouse passes away, and it's not uncommon for the second spouse to pass away in a short space of time. And, to the outside, that spouse may not have had a medical condition that would cause them to imminently die. But their sense of purpose is gone. Their sense of getting up in the morning's gone because that person isn't there. And, how do you change those habits of a lifetime when you're so used to being around that person? So people do die of loneliness. That's a thing.
So what can we do? What can we do as a society to stave that off, if you like, to maintain a connection and socialisation?
I think we need to cherish our older people, know that they are really important, and, just because they are older, they have so much wisdom and knowledge and things that they can share. Communities wrapping around older people and including them together in whatever activities there are, and neighbours checking on each other and making sure that everybody's okay and supporting each other.
You find that, don't you, when there's an event, a disaster or something, and suddenly everyone's around knocking on doors, are you all right? But I guess it's when things are just rolling along fine, and everyone gets on with their daily life, and you miss that opportunity in a way. Sure.
Yeah, but I'm always surprised when I see an older person and they tell me what their neighbours do for them. Oh yeah, my neighbour takes my bin out, my neighbour helps bring in my mail, my neighbour does this, they provide me with food, all these sorts of things. So there are pockets of our community where we are supporting each other in a really beautiful way.
My neighbour is actually looking after our puppy at the moment while we're away, so there you go.
Yeah.
She's fantastic.
Yeah, and back to the grandparents looking after the grandkids. I think we should close on that point. Thank you, Dr. Cheryl. If you want to dive into this topic more deeply, you can listen to the full-length podcast called Can You Actually Slow Aging? And if you're listening regularly, thank you.
You're very much part of this conversation.
Over time, we hope this becomes a space where people feel less alone navigating these years and more informed, supported and confident.
And if you have found this useful, please follow or subscribe and leave a review.
Just a nice one, though.
It really does help others find the podcast, especially the nice ones.
See you next time.